My name is Noah Harrison. I had no idea I'd be telling this story. But after seeing what Jesus showed me when I died, I know I have to do it. I couldn't keep what I saw to myself because it was so important for this time in history. There was a 9-minute death on January 18th, 2025. It was during that time that Jesus Christ told me shocking facts about the California fires that I had to tell everyone. You will be shocked by what I learned. Allow me to describe what took place. I worked as a firefighter for the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection for 28 years. The job wasn't just my job, it was my calling. Every time I stepped into those fires, I felt God with me, watching over me and protecting me, but I didn't stop working. I became a consultant and teacher, and taught the next generation what I had learned. It was just another January morning when it began. I was going to a church in my area for fire safety training when I started to feel weird. It was tough for me to catch my breath, and my chest felt tight. I pulled over to the side of the road because I thought I needed a moment to calm down. That's the last thing I remember seeing before it got dark. After that, what I thought I knew about life, death, and the spiritual fight California is in, the middle of now changed. There are so many deep and important things about what I'm about to tell you that I've spent countless hours in prayer asking for help on how to say it correctly. Christ made it clear, though. This lesson needs to be spread, even if words aren't enough to describe it. I don't remember feeling darkness as the first thing I felt after losing awareness. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't the bright, sharp light of a hospital room or the warm glow of dawn, but something else. It looked like the light was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It felt alive and aware. That's when I knew what the Bible meant, when it said God was like light. As people rushed to help, I could see my body lying on the ground in my truck. But I wasn't attached to it anymore, and I wasn't scared or upset about leaving it behind. Instead, I felt a peace that words can't describe, a peace that was more than just being calm or happy. All of my worries, fears, and worries about the world seemed to have been gently taken away. But this was only the start. All of a sudden, the scene below started to fade away, and I was pulled up through what I can only describe as layers of reality. There was no flying or floating about it. Instead, it seemed like the layers of existence were peeling back, showing more and more truths as time went on. The presence I felt getting stronger as I went through these stages was unlike anything I had ever felt on Earth. It was pure love, but not the kind of love that people know is limited and based on conditions. There was no mistake about it. This love knew everything about me, every mistake, every worry, and every weak moment, but it loved me no matter what. Then he showed up. Jesus Christ himself stood in front of me, though stood isn't quite the right word. He was everywhere and affected everything, but he was also very close to us and right there. His look was both recognizable and hard to describe. He gave off such strong love that it would have made me fall to my knees if I still had knees. What can I say about his face? It had all the power and majesty of the one who made the world, but it was also filled with infinite kindness and compassion. His eyes looked like they held whole worlds, but when he looked at me, I felt like I was the only soul in the world. Not only did he know everything I did and thought, but he also knew every moment of my life. His love never changed. "My child," he said, but he didn't use words. Instead, his thoughts went straight into my mind, carrying layers of meaning that words alone can't fully convey. "You need to know what's really going on in California, which is why I brought you here. You need to tell my people about what you are about to see." The space around us changed at that moment. All of a sudden, we were looking down at California from a height that showed not only the physical world, but also the spiritual world behind it. The sight almost made me cry. The fires that were going on across the state were more than just flames. They were signs of a greater spiritual conflict that had been building for generations. Jesus pointed out to me specific places where there was a lot of mental darkness. He told me to pay close attention, and I saw that these dark areas matched exactly with the places where the fires were doing the most damage. What I saw next, though, really scared me. Within these fires, there were beings that seemed to feed off of the flames. These beings were not physical things. In the usual sense of the word, demons are winged monsters with pitchforks. They looked more like live shadows that moved around in the fire and got stronger as more land burned. Jesus said that these fires are not just natural disasters. They are the physical signs of mental corruption. People who have turned away from truth, love, and me have become easy prey for the enemy. Every time my kids choose the world's ways over my ways, these things get stronger. He showed me how these magic things worked. The fires were not started directly by them. They didn't need to. Instead, they affected people's choices and actions in ways that made it easy for fires to start and spread. They took advantage of people's fear, anger, and most of all, lack of spiritual interest. Jesus told me to look deeper, and all of a sudden I could see how these things worked in the spiritual world. In people's minds, they told them lies like God wasn't real, truth was subjective, and safety was more important than spiritual growth. As more people believed these lies, the spiritual darkness grew greater, and the fires got harder to control. But then Jesus showed me something that made me feel hopeful. I could see bright spots of light fighting back against the darkness in some places. He said that these lights were people and groups who had kept their faith, who put God first in their lives, and who had a real relationship with Him. The spiritual beings couldn't hold on to the places where these lights shone the brightest, and the physical fires had a hard time moving forward. It wasn't like these places never had fires. Yes, they did. Still, the fires weren't able to spread as quickly as they did in other places. Jesus told me to pay close attention to this, and then showed me a series of dreams that went through time. I saw how California had moved away from real religion over many generations. It wasn't a quick shift. It happened so slowly that you hardly noticed it. People didn't completely turn away from God. They just pushed Him to the edges of their lives. They swapped out real worship for entertainment, deep faith for shallow piety, and real community for digital connections. Jesus said with a sad voice, "My church has too often chosen ease over conviction, popularity over truth, and give in to fear rather than courage." It seems like a lot of people who carry my name have swapped relationships for rituals, passions for programs, and real worship for meaningless customs. He then showed me what would happen if things kept going this way. The image was very scary. I saw the fires spreading faster than anything we'd seen before. They burned down not only trees and houses, but also what seemed like society itself. It wasn't just flames. That was because they were judgment fires that destroyed everything that wasn't based on true faith. But Jesus then showed me another way, the way of salvation. I saw people waking up and turning their whole hearts back to God. I saw churches turn back into places of real prayer, not just get-togethers for fun. I saw families coming back to a real faith and towns being changed by God's love. The mental atmosphere changed a lot where this took place. The evil things that were eating on the fires started to get weaker and move away. Even though the physical fires were still there, they were easier to deal with. Since they were no longer facing spiritual forces, traditional ways of fighting fires started to work better. He told you this is the lesson you need to spread. Bolsa alone won't be able to put out the fires in California. There is no technology, firefighting method, or government program that can get to the root problem. These fires are a sign that you need to come back to me. Then he showed me in detail how this return to faith had to take place. It wasn't just about praying more or going to church more often. It was about having a big change of heart. He showed me how real turning away from sin and returning to faith would show up in real life. It was nice to see families put away their electronics and pray together. I saw churches open their doors for longer times of worship and prayer, not just for meetings. People in the same area came together to help each other, share resources, and support each other in their faith. The most important thing I saw was that this rebirth had to begin in each person's heart. Jesus showed me that when people chose to put God first, it had an effect on other people in the spiritual world. When enough people in an area made this choice, it made it spiritually impossible for the forces that were starting the fires to get through. Jesus said, "But be careful, time is short. The time to make this change is running out. See those fires? They're just the start if my people don't turn back to me with all their hearts." Then he showed me something that made my spiritual eyes cry. I saw how much he loved everyone in California, even the people who didn't want to be with him. His heart broke for every family whose home was lost and whose life was changed by the fires. But his love was perfect, and sometimes perfect love means letting people face the results of their actions so they will turn back to him. He told them to remember that these fires can be put out, but not just by people working together. Tell my people that I'm ready to welcome them. Tell them that everything will change if they truly turn away from sin and back to faith. Tell them that the problem is spiritual at its core and can't be solved by politics, technology, or human knowledge. As the vision went on, Jesus showed me more specifics about how this spiritual rebirth had to take place. He showed me that doing sacred things the same way they've always been done wasn't enough. He showed me that many churches needed to get back to their first love, which wasn't shows or programs, but a real relationship with Him. What I saw was how this message would be read. Some would ignore it or make fun of it, but those with open hearts would see the truth and speak out. He showed me that these people would be lights in their communities, helping others understand the call to return to faith and act on it. The strength of the image started to get stronger. Jesus showed me that every prayer, act of worship, and chance to truly turn away from sin had power in the spiritual world. I saw how these spiritual acts covered areas in a way that made it harder for the forces that started the fires to work. But He also showed me what would happen in places where this message was turned down. The fires kept getting worse, which we couldn't figure out, and which made it impossible to put out. Because they weren't getting to the root of the problem, traditional ways of fighting fires would lose their effectiveness over time. He told them they had to make their choice quickly. These fires are cruel and kind at the same time. I want both judgment on the spirit of worldliness that has come into my church, and forgiveness because they are still a warning that can be taken seriously. Tell them that I want them to return to their first love, their true faith, and putting me first in everything. He showed me that this coming back to faith would not look like what most people think it will. Going to church more or following more rules wasn't the point. It was about getting to know Him on a deeper level, which touched every part of life. As people put God first, I saw them change their daily habits, their top goals, and the way they lived their whole lives. I saw how this changed not only people's lives, but also whole neighborhoods. The spiritual environment changed and the fires lost their supernatural power where this happened. Jesus gave me one last word, right before I felt like I was being pulled back to my body. I love you, tell them. Tell them they can still turn back to me. Also, let them know that they need to make a choice now. No more sitting on the fence. Now is not the time for letting your faith slip. They need to decide if they want to serve me with all their hearts or keep going the way they are. His voice was filled with love and anxiety at the same time. It wasn't just an idea or a nice mental thought. There was a mental and physical need to stay alive. He spoke one last time as I felt myself being pulled back toward my body. Do not forget what you have seen. Share it without fail. Don't be afraid to tell the truth because you don't want to be criticized. People who can hear will understand. The next thing I knew, I was running out of air while rescuers worked on me. After a while, they told me I had been dead for 9 minutes. From what I know about medicine, the lack of oxygen should have hurt my head. Instead, the important lesson Jesus had given me was more clear in my mind than ever. This is why I'm telling this story now. Christ didn't just show me things for me. Anyone who will listen will get the message. The California fires are more than just bad luck. They are a spiritual wake-up call that tells us what will happen if we don't return to our true faith. There is an easy way out, but many people don't want to give up everything and trust God completely. Not just going to church once in a while or praying on the side, but real faith that changes your life and puts God first in everything you do. This is something I have to share. He made it clear that not only me was getting this message, everyone can use it. You can no longer sit on the fence. Each of us has to pick our own way. You can make your choice. Bear in mind what Jesus showed me, though. There is not much time left. The time to make a choice is running out. If we don't turn back to God now, these fires are just the start. We all need to choose to return to our real faith while there is still time. May God bless you all.